Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive into the world of naval power. Today we're taking on a matchup that sounds almost impossible, almost like a scene pulled out from a military thriller or a strategy game, but it's rooted in reality, history, and current geopolitics. On one side, the pride of the Philippine Navy, the BRP Jose Rizal, a modern and sleek guided missile frigate that represents the Philippines' leap into advanced naval warfare. And on the other side, the giant of the East, China's Liaoning, aircraft carrier, a massive floating fortress of steel and aviation that symbolizes Beijing's rise as a maritime superpower. Now let's be honest, the size difference here is staggering. The Jose Rizal is a frigate, designed for patrols, escort missions, and multi-role operations. The Liaoning, on the other hand, is an aircraft carrier, essentially a mobile airbase carrying dozens of fighter jets, helicopters, and protected by a fleet of escort warships. It's like comparing a finely sharpened spear to an entire fortress with an army inside. But here's where it gets interesting. Modern naval warfare isn't just about size. It's about technology, training, strategy, alliances, and how a nation intends to use its ships. The Philippines may not have a massive navy like China, but every ship they deploy carries strategic value, especially in the contested waters of the South China Sea. That's where the BRP Jose Rizal comes in. It's not just a ship, it's a symbol of modernization, of stepping into a new era. For the Philippine Navy, this frigate is more than steel and missiles. It's a statement that they are ready to defend their maritime territory. On the flip side, the Liaoning isn't just any warship. It's the crown jewel of China's early carrier ambitions. A ship that once started its life in the Soviet Union, bought as a husk from Ukraine, and reborn under China's shipyards into the behemoth it is today. For China, Liaoning is not just about power projection. It's about prestige, proving to the world that they too can play in the league of carrier operating nations. So the big question is, what happens when we put these two ships under the spotlight? What can the BRP Jose Rizal do against a ship like the Liaoning? Could it even stand a chance? Or is this a pure David versus Goliath story, where the smaller ship survives not by brute strength but by tactics, allies, and agility? Stick around because we're about to break it all down, piece by piece. Now let's shift our focus to the star of the Philippine Navy, the BRP Jose Rizal. Named after the country's national hero, this ship isn't just a war machine, it's a floating symbol of pride, identity, and modernization. For decades, the Philippine Navy operated with outdated vessels, hand-me-down ships from allies, and second-hand equipment that could barely match the rising threats in regional waters. But the arrival of the Jose Rizal changed that story. It was a leap, a statement to the region and the world that the Philippines was stepping into the modern naval arena. The Jose Rizal is a guided missile frigate, the first of its class, built by South Korea's Hyundai Heavy Industries. Right from the start, it was designed to bring balance. Affordable yet lethal, compact yet versatile, modest in size but equipped with advanced systems that give it teeth in combat. Displacing around 2,600 tons and stretching about 107 meters, in length it might look small compared to the steel giants of the region, but every inch of it is designed with purpose. This is not a battleship meant to intimidate by sheer size. This is a ship that survives and fights by agility, precision, and adaptability. When you walk through the ship, if you could, you'd notice the modern design philosophy. It's built with stealth features, sharp edges, and sloped surfaces that help reduce its radar cross-section. In today's world, being harder to detect is sometimes more important than being heavily armored. After all, you can't hit what you can't see. This stealth approach makes the Jose Rizal less visible on enemy radars, giving it a fighting chance even against much larger ships. Now let's talk about the heart of its combat capability, its weapons and systems. The Jose Rizal comes with a 76mm OTO Melara super rapid gun mounted on its bow. This gun can engage air, surface, and even ground targets with high precision. Then there's the 30mm secondary gun for close-in defense, and, more importantly, its missile systems. The ship is fitted with anti-ship missile launchers, capable of firing SSM-700K Sea Star surface-to-surface missiles, deadly weapons designed to strike enemy ships at long range with pinpoint accuracy. These missiles alone transformed the Jose Rizal from a simple patrol ship into a real threat to larger vessels. For air defense, the ship is fitted with Mistral short-range surface-to-air missiles in a Simbad RC launcher. While not as extensive as a carrier's layered defenses, they provide a shield against incoming aircraft or missiles, especially when combined with its modern radar systems. Speaking of radar, the Jose Rizal uses the sophisticated Hanwha systems, Naval Shield ICMS and Thales radar equipment, allowing it to track multiple targets across air and sea. In naval combat, information is the first weapon. Whoever sees first, reacts first, and fires first usually wins. This ship is built around that principle. Another vital feature is its helicopter deck and hangar. The Jose Rizal can carry and operate a naval helicopter like the AW-159 Wildcat, which dramatically extends its eyes and reach beyond the horizon. That helicopter can hunt submarines, scout enemy positions, and even engage surface targets with torpedoes and missiles. Suddenly, the frigate isn't just a ship confined to what its sensors can see. It becomes a node in a much bigger sphere of influence. Inside, the ship houses advanced combat management systems, electronic warfare equipment, and decoys to protect itself from incoming missiles. It's designed for multi-role missions: anti-submarine warfare, anti-surface warfare, anti-air warfare, and even humanitarian missions. That versatility makes it not just a warship, but a strategic tool for the Philippines, especially in contested waters like the West Philippine Sea. But perhaps the most important thing about the BRP Jose Rizal is not the steel or the missiles, it's what it represents. For the Philippines, this is the dawn of a modern fleet. This frigate was the first step toward building a navy that can not only patrol, but also defend, that can not only respond, but also deter. In the vast waters of Southeast Asia, where disputes over islands and maritime rights dominate the headlines, the presence of the Jose Rizal is a message. It says the Philippines will not simply rely on allies or sit quietly on the sidelines. They now have a ship that can sail into contested zones with confidence. Of course, we also have to remember its limitations. It's still just a frigate, light compared to destroyers, dwarfed by carriers. Its air defense is relatively short-ranged. Its missile load is limited, and in a high-intensity battle against a major power, it would be outnumbered quickly. But in naval warfare, survivability often comes from clever strategy, alliances, and the element of surprise. The Jose Rizal is not meant to go head-to-head with an entire carrier strike group on its own. Instead, it's a precision tool, a sharp blade in the arsenal of the Philippine Navy, meant to protect the nation's sovereignty and remind adversaries that even a small ship can bite. Think of it this way: the Jose Rizal is like a boxer who relies on speed, agility, and sharp strikes. It can't take too many hits, but it can land a punch that matters. And in modern warfare, where even a single missile can change the course of battle, that's a power worth respecting. Now let's turn our attention to the giant, the colossus of the seas, the ship that towers over almost anything the Philippine Navy can deploy, the Liaoning. To understand this warship is to understand not just metal and machinery, but the story of China's rise, ambition, and hunger to project power far beyond its shores. The Liaoning isn't just another ship. It is the flagship of a nation that wants to be recognized as a true global maritime force. The story of the Liaoning starts far away from China. Back in the late Soviet era, a carrier named Varyag was being built in Ukraine. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, the unfinished ship was left in limbo. For years it sat there, rusting, unwanted. Then came China. In a move that stunned the world, they purchased the half-completed hull in the late 1990s, supposedly to turn it into a floating casino. At least, that was the cover story. But Beijing had bigger dreams. After towing the massive hulk across the seas and refitting it for years, the Varyag was reborn. In 2012, it was commissioned into the People's Liberation Army Navy as the Liaoning, China's very first aircraft carrier. From that moment, Liaoning became more than just steel. It became a symbol. For decades, only a handful of countries had the ability to operate carriers: the United States, Russia, France, Britain. Carriers are the crown jewels of navies, floating cities of war that bring unmatched power projection. For China, entering this exclusive club meant one thing: they had arrived. Now let's talk about the sheer size and presence of this warship. The Liaoning displaces over 60,000 tons fully loaded, dwarfing smaller frigates like the Rizal. It stretches over 300 meters long, almost 3 football fields end to end. Standing on its deck, you're not just on a ship, you're on a floating airbase. Its flight deck, with the iconic ski jump ramp at the bow, can launch and recover fighter jets at sea. Suddenly, the ocean itself becomes a runway for Chinese air-powered. On board, the Liaoning can carry around 40 aircraft, including the Shenyang J-15 fighters, helicopters for anti-submarine warfare, search and rescue, and early warning operations. These aircraft transform the Liaoning from a single ship into a force multiplier. Where the Rizal relies on its limited radar and helicopter, the Liaoning projects a web of aircraft across hundreds of miles. This gives it the ability to strike, scout, and control the seas in a way no frigate could ever dream of. The ship is also equipped with defensive weapons of its own. It carries close-in weapon systems, anti-aircraft missiles, and layered defenses designed to protect it from incoming threats. But what truly protects the Liaoning isn't just what's on board, it's what sails with it. A carrier never travels alone. It's always part of a carrier strike group, surrounded by destroyers, frigates, submarines, and supply ships. Together, they form a floating fortress that can move anywhere in the region. Operating the Liaoning wasn't easy at first. China had no carrier experience before. For years, they used the ship mainly as a training platform to learn how to launch and recover jets at sea, to train pilots in carrier operations and to refine doctrines. But as time went on, the Liaoning became more operational. Today, it sails into the contested waters of the South China Sea and beyond, flying the Chinese flag and sending a clear message. China is here to stay, and it can project power like never before. Now imagine standing on the deck of the Liaoning during flight operations. The roar of engines, the heat blasting from jet exhausts, the thunder as J-15 fighters accelerate down the ski ramp and leap into the sky. This is raw power, the kind of spectacle meant not only for combat, but for intimidation. To neighboring countries with smaller navies, the Liaoning is a reminder of the gap in capability. To allies and adversaries alike, it is a demonstration that China has entered the big leagues. But we also need to look at the reality behind the spectacle. As powerful as the Liaoning seems, it has its limits. Unlike U.S. carriers with nuclear propulsion and catapults, the Liaoning is conventionally powered and uses a ski jump system. That means its aircraft can't take off as heavily armed or fueled as those from American carriers. Its air wing is smaller, its endurance shorter, and its combat power still less than the most advanced navies. Critics often call it a starter carrier, a stepping stone for China to gain experience before building larger, more capable carriers. And indeed, China is already working on more advanced carriers that surpass the Liaoning. Still, dismissing the Liaoning would be a mistake. Even as a starter carrier, it has shifted the balance in the Asia-Pacific. It gives China a platform to practice carrier operations, to intimidate rivals, and to project influence into disputed waters. And against smaller navies, even a starter carrier is overwhelming. A frigate like the Rizal might be modern and capable for its size, but against the shadow of the Liaoning, it seems almost microscopic. The Liaoning is not just a ship, it is a political statement, a floating message that China's naval power is no longer coastal, no longer limited, but blue water, global, and ambitious. Every time it sails, it tells a story of China's determination to dominate the seas around it. And for countries like the Philippines, it poses a question: how do you counter something so massive, so imposing, when your own flagship is a frigate a fraction of its size? So here we are. On one side, the BRP Rizal, a sleek modern frigate, compact but armed with cutting-edge weapons, representing the Philippines' leap into the future of naval defense. On the other side, the Liaoning, a massive aircraft carrier, a floating fortress and a symbol of China's growing dominance on the high seas. Two ships, two nations, two philosophies of war. But how do they really stack up against each other? Let's start with the obvious: size and power projection. The Liaoning is over 60,000 tons, carrying dozens of aircraft, hundreds of missiles, and thousands of sailors. It is an airbase at sea, capable of launching strike aircraft that can operate hundreds of kilometers away from the ship. The BRP Rizal, at just 2,600 tons, is a fraction of that. It carries a single helicopter and a limited arsenal of missiles. If this were purely a contest of raw power, the Liaoning wins by a landslide. One carrier air wing could overwhelm a frigate like the Rizal within minutes. But here's the thing. Naval warfare isn't always about brute force. The Liaoning is powerful, yes, but it is also a giant target. A ship that big, moving across contested waters, is difficult to hide. The Rizal, by contrast, is stealthier, smaller, and built to disappear on radar. In a hypothetical engagement, the frigate's best chance wouldn't be to go head-to-head. It would be to strike from the shadows using its surface-to-surface missiles to punch above its weight. Remember, modern anti-ship missiles can cripple even the largest warships if they hit the right spot. In a David versus Goliath scenario, one well-placed strike could cause serious damage. Next, let's talk about defense. The Liaoning is never alone. It sails with destroyers, frigates, submarines, and supply ships in a full carrier strike group. These escorts provide layered defense against submarines, aircraft, and incoming missiles. The BRP Rizal, however, often sails as part of smaller Philippine Navy groups or alone during patrols. In a one-on-one, it could potentially launch a surprise missile strike. But in reality, going against the Liaoning means going against its entire fleet, an almost impossible challenge for a lone frigate. Now look at air power. The Liaoning can deploy the J-15 fighters, which are essentially navalized versions of the Su-33. These jets can fly far beyond the reach of Rizal's limited air defenses. The Philippine frigate has point defense missiles and guns for close encounters, but it cannot defend against wave after wave of fighter-borne attacks. This is where the massive gap really shows. The carrier doesn't even need to get close. Its aircraft can do the fighting while the ship itself remains at a safe distance. But let's think strategically. The BRP Rizal was never meant to take down a carrier alone. Its real strength lies in working with allies, with regional security frameworks, and in using geography. In the shallow, contested waters of the South China Sea, a smaller, stealthier frigate can weave in and out of littoral zones, hugging coastlines, and using the environment to its advantage. A massive carrier like the Liaoning, while powerful, in open seas becomes vulnerable in tight, missile-filled waters. In that sense, the Rizal's agility and modern sensors give it an edge in survivability, if not in raw firepower. Symbolically, the comparison is just as striking. The Liaoning represents a superpower's ambition, a declaration that China wants to be seen as a dominant force on the global stage. The BRP Rizal represents a smaller nation's determination to stand firm, to modernize, and to defend its sovereignty no matter how uneven the playing field. When you put them side by side, you don't just see two ships, you see two stories. One of massive expansion, one of proud resilience. So what happens if they were to meet in a real confrontation? Realistically, the Rizal wouldn't survive, against the full might of the Liaoning and its strike group. But survival isn't always the goal. Sometimes just being there, just showing up in contested waters, just raising the flag, is enough to make a statement. In that sense, both ships play their roles perfectly. The Liaoning project's dominance, the Rizal project's defiance, and this is where the beauty of the comparison lies. It's not just about who would win in a fight, it's about what these ships mean for their countries. The Liaoning tells the world that China has arrived, that it can sail carriers across the Pacific and beyond. The Rizal tells the world that the Philippines, though smaller, will not back down, that it has the will and the tools to stand guard over its seas. At the end of the day, if these two ships ever found themselves staring across the same waters, the real battle wouldn't just be about missiles and jets. It would be about messages, about power, pride, sovereignty, and survival. And in that sense, both ships are winners in their own way. One dominates by sheer presence. The other inspires by standing tall against impossible odds. So the next time you see the BRP Jose Rizal patrolling the Philippine seas, or the Liaoning sailing through the South China Sea, remember, it's not just steel on water. It's history, strategy, and the unending story of nations trying to define their place on the vast blue battlefield of the ocean.